Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, the show that is part of the Simply Luxurious Life online destination, cultivating true contentment, the art of living a life of quality over quantity. Visit the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, at our simplified URL, tsll.co, or thesimplyluxuriouslife.com to find the show notes for each podcast episode, as well as much more weekly content to elevate your everyday and deepen your contentment. From a Monday motivational post, recipes, videos of the cooking show series, style and decor inspiration, French and British inspired content, and readers' favorite regular weekly post, This and That, which is posted each Friday morning. Now to today's episode. Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 370th episode of The Simple Sophisticate. Today's episode is a special episode because I had the opportunity to welcome a guest on the show who has written a new book, just released yesterday, December 5th, that speaks to so much of why it is so important to honor what brings us true fulfillment, and thus then we can experience what true contentment actually is. And as much as we live in a world that says chase your dreams, live your best life, there is often an unspoken or understood to be best way of living. So the outer directive to live your best life contradicts the cultural acceptance for what is best. And so, as someone who has found the nourishment I have always been looking for, and the nourishment that has enabled me to find my true contentment and be able to truly and deeply and unapologetically savor my everydays, my life happens to be someone who is single. And so, thus, I deeply revel in it. And as I've stepped more into that place of saying, yeah, I really enjoy this, and it is a genuine choice, not everyone believes that that is possible. Not everyone trusts that that can be true. And having had the life experience I have had in relationships, as I've written in my books and shared on the blog, for me, my most fulfilling life has been and currently is when I am single. And that is not because I've had horrible relationships, as we will talk about in our conversation today. And so when I learned of Dr. Bella DePaulo's new book, Single at Heart, The Power of Freedom and Heart-Filling Joy of Single Life, I knew I wanted to bring her on the show. And thankfully, she accepted the invitation and joined me to talk about it. Now, if you are in a relationship, if you are married, and you love being in a relationship and you are happily married, this is not a book that is saying one is better than the other. That is the whole point of writing this book, with regards to letting people know that there are multiple ways to be fulfilled as far as different people find fulfillment in different ways. And to honor that and to not prioritize or put into a hierarchy so that one is viewed better than the other. This is, as she will share in our conversation, not an anti-marriage, not an anti-couple book, but as she will say, they already have a good enough press team for marriage and coupledom. It's time that those of us who enjoy being single and reveling in it and find great fulfillment in it have a book that reveals the research that often gets unreported, that often gets cherry picked to prove something else. And she will talk in detail about the research that I have a feeling many of you have read or heard about, and she will dispel the myths that would have us believe the only way to be the happiest is to be married, demonstrating that single life brings much satisfaction as well as many health benefits and even more satisfaction as we get older, which is contrary to what the culture would have us believe. Without further ado, let us get to our conversation. I'll introduce Dr. Bella DePaulo and her credentials. And please know she invited me to call her Bella. And so throughout the conversation, sometimes I'll say Dr. DePaulo, but most of the time it's Bella. And it is with absolute respect that I do so with her invitation to say, to call her Bella. Now to our conversation. To all my fellow single at heart listeners, what if I told you that by embracing living single, we are tapping into the key to a flourishing, most meaningful, and fulfilling life? Study after study, when looked at in its entirety and objectively, research that's been done around the globe and in multiple cultures and countries reveals that indeed our most fulfilling, meaningful, authentic, and psychologically rich life manifests when we step with strength and self-confidence into the life that brings us joy, despite what society would have us believe. Perhaps you already know my guest and watched along with 1.6 million other viewers her TEDx talk titled What No One Ever Told You About People Who Are Single. Or maybe you have read one of her many articles written in her Living Single column on Psychology Today's website, which she began doing in 2008. Or perhaps you, like me, read her previous books, Singled Out or How We Live Now. However you were first introduced to my guest, or if today is your introduction, I am so grateful that Dr. Bella DePaulo is joining me today to talk about her brand new book that was just released yesterday, Single at Heart, The Power, Freedom, and Heart-Filling Joy of Single Life. Dr. DePaulo, having earned her PhD in psychology from Harvard, and then teaching psychology for 2 decades at the University of Virginia before moving to the West Coast to work as an academic affiliate in the Department of Psychology and Brain Sciences at the University of California, Santa Barbara, is here on the show to talk about her new book, Single at Heart. Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, Dr. Bella DePaulo.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you, but I also, most importantly, want to thank you for writing this book, Single at Heart. I first read your work back about just over 10 years ago, Singled Out, and I appreciated your research and findings that you shared because in that book, I find, and if people haven't read that book, it really is a good partner with this book because it dispels a lot of the myths that are swirling around in our modern culture that try to fearmonger those of us who are not pursuing the married life or not really interested in it, and actually are made to feel that single living is inferior and not to be celebrated. And so when I learned of your new book, I was like, oh, I got so excited. And I eagerly read it in one weekend, and I found it validating as it gives credence to something I have always intuitively enjoyed, but would often be pressured not to celebrate or appreciate. So first of all, thank you for writing this book.
I'm so glad you liked it.
I want to make sure that people understand a little bit about the psychology focus that you shifted into in 1992 that led you to becoming the expert of single living. You wrote in your book a guiding sentence: remember that one is a whole number. How did this, not just that sentence, but how did you come to focus solely on this field of study?
Yeah, so I've been single my whole life, and I never wanted to be married, but I thought that wanting to be married was like getting bitten by a bug. And I was just slow, and I hadn't gotten bitten yet. And at some point, I don't know when, I realized, no, self, this is who you are. You're always going to love and enjoy and flourish by being a single person. So that was about me. But at the same time, I'm seeing all these headlines in the media, like, oh, get married and you'll be happier and healthier and you'll live longer and all that stuff. And I didn't have any reason to doubt that at first because I was studying something entirely different. I had an expertise in the psychology of deceiving and detecting deceit, which is kind of interesting. I don't feel as passionate about it as I do about my singles work. So I was thought, well, I hope there's like some exception to this supposed rule that if you get married, you'll be happier. Maybe some kind of singles are happier. And it was just astonishing to me to find that when I, as a research scientist and a methodologist, went and looked at the original research studies, they weren't showing that at all. So that's the science part of it. So now the personal part. So, as much as I love being single, I did not love the way people seem to assume that if you're single, you're living a lesser life, or if you're single, you don't have a life. So, for example, when I was teaching at the University of Virginia, the person who organized the courses offered asked me to teach at night. She said it would be too hard for the married professors to come in at night. And that was even before any of them had kids. So really, um, so I started keeping this folder, which I kept a secret at first, that was documenting the ways that people think about single people. The cat. I don't know if you remember from a long time ago the Kathy cartoons and
Yep.
and, um, and even places like prestigious publications like the New Yorker, the New York
Yeah.
Times were saying things that were demeaning to single people. So I started this folder, and the first thing I put in it was a column that was published in my local newspaper around Christmas. And it had one sentence in it, which was, one is a whole number. And I wasn't feeling like I wasn't whole because I was single, but it was clear that other people worried that if they were single, they weren't whole. I mean, we can blame Jerry Maguire in part, right? If you don't have anyone to complete you, you're half a person. Well, are you kidding me? So I started collecting these examples from the popular media, from prestige media, from scholarly writings, which was devastating for my fellow scholars to be putting down single people. And then I started asking other single people if they ever had the experience of being treated as lesser than, or as not really as important as those couple people. And I told them the story about the scheduling of classes. And I did this the first time in a group of people. And I asked one person, and she said, oh, yeah, let me tell you. Then some other people came along. Then some other people joined us. And then the next day, when I opened my email, I had emails from them saying, oh, and another thing. And
You open the you
we
let
would talk.
them share the truth.
Had
Yeah.
the same experience. So it became clear to me that this is something that was striking a nerve. It was resonating and that it needed to be addressed. And from that point on, I just changed my whole scholarly life. And in some ways, my whole personal life. That scholarly, I just gave up on the deception, as interesting as that was, as fascinating as studying single life. And I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara, in the year 2000 for what was supposed to be a 1 year sabbatical. And I loved it so much. I just stayed here. Something you can do, if you're single, you can do that. And I changed my whole area of interest, and I decided this is what I want to do. I want to write about single people, and I want to write about them in a way that doesn't pity them or feel sorry for them or tell them how to fix their sorry lives, but instead celebrates them and recognizes that what they have strengths and advantages that many coupled people don't have.
That's what the tone of this book, after having read Singled Out, the tone of this book is celebratory. It's full of reason to
Yes.
be savoring this life that people choose to live. So could you talk to us a little bit about who or what is someone who identifies as single at heart?
People who are single at heart love being single. It's their best life. It's their most fulfilling, meaningful, psychologically rich, and joyful life. People who are single at heart are happy and flourishing because they are single, not in spite of it.
That I think that is the key, because the messaging that I and you alluded to this as well in the 90s with Kathy cartoons and the articles you would read in these prestigious newspapers, but even in the early aughts and even to date. I mean just recently I've been here, but the prevalent one that I always hear is you will only be the happiest if you marry. And so my question to you, and I've watched your TED talk, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the current messaging and historic messaging of how it's being purported to be that single living is inferior and that we should choose being married. Could you talk a little bit about how we have been misled?
That cultural messaging is relentless. You find it in movies, TV shows, song lyrics, novels, and scholarly writings, which drives me crazy. and, and we find it in everyday life, in our conversations, in the casual assumptions people make. It's also kind of built into politics, religion, the law. So it's like institutionally supported that single people just aren't as good as those married people. And when I went and looked at the best research that follows the same people over the course of their lives, and every year asks how happy they are, looks at how healthy they are, the people who get married do not become lastingly happier than they were when they were single. In fact, at first, when they first get married, like right around the wedding, some people experience a little blip in happiness. Like it's so exciting getting married and everybody gives you presents and, that's fun. But then over time, the happiness levels decrease and decrease and decrease until they go back to wherever they were before you got married. So there's no lasting increase. Of course, these are averages. It's different for different people. And for health, there's even some evidence from a long standing study that's been going on for years and years that finds that when people get married, they actually feel a little less healthy than they did when they were single. Oh, and going back to the happiness for a minute, that little flip in happiness people get around the wedding, on the average, the only people who experience that are the ones who stay
Thank you
married.
for sharing that
The
detail.
people who are headed for divorce are already getting a little less happy as the day of their wedding approaches. So they don't get that honeymoon effect of becoming a little happier around the time of their wedding.
Well, and if I'm remembering this correctly, didn't some of the studies even remove the people that got divorced? And so thus it skewed the
Yes.
results
Oh my
entirely?
gosh. Right. So here's what you will hear even today, almost all the time. You'll hear about this study that shows, for example, that married people are healthier or better off in some way than single people. Well, what they're doing is they're comparing people who are currently married to people who are single. So they are either taking all the people who hated marriage and got divorced and setting them aside and saying, don't look
Yeah.
there. Well, that's
That's not,
cheating.
yeah. That's not the truth.
Right.
That's not. Yeah, I really appreciate you dispelling that in the book in detail for us again. That I think is an aha moment because that is never shared in those articles that just allude to
Right.
that finding very very swiftly. So I want to talk about what is so enjoyable about those of us who choose to be single and savoring this lifestyle. I want to talk about this whole idea of freedom and autonomy.
Right.
You devote an entire chapter to this. Being able to be the deciders is a fundamental reason
Mhm.
those who choose to be to choose to be single be are single. And you have you write, quote, sometimes contentment and fulfillment come from the small stuff, such as arranging our schedules, our homes, the structure of our everyday lives just the way we like them. So, why does freedom nourish singles at heart so much, where for many others, it would be fear inducing to live by themselves? Why does that happen?
That, yeah, that's a great way to put it. There are these big studies of like 30 some countries that look at how much people value their freedom and how much happiness they get out of it. And everyone who values freedom is happier, whether they're married or couple or single or not. But the single people get more happiness out of valuing freedom. And I think the reason is that they do more with their freedom. So they use their freedom to pursue their interests and their passions and to live by their values. And that might mean, traveling and exploring the world or learning and growing, or it might mean being there for the people you care about the most when they need you, or it could mean pursuing work that is especially meaningful rather than choosing whatever will pay you the most or offer the most advancement. And I think you mentioned kind of the scariness to some other people, and I think people who are single at heart are a little less likely to be afraid to use their freedom to live their best lives. And in a way, they almost have to be, it's almost definitional that they're less afraid because by embracing their single lives, they are already going against the grain. They're living true to themselves rather than living the life that would bring them more rewards, external rewards, more celebration, more respect.
I appreciated you going into that because you said to the fact that when someone's alone, they basically are having to look at themselves or having to examine themselves. And as a single
Mhm.
person, if you're choosing to live this way, you're willing to do that examination. Or if you aren't initially willing, you do have to do it. And then you realize, okay, this is what I actually desire. This is what really truly brings me happiness or dissatisfaction. And so then you
Mhm.
start making, like you just said, choices that honor what would be most fulfilling to you rather than doing it for external applause.
Right,
And it does take a lot
right.
of strength, as you said, to do that. A lot of strength.
Yeah.
And so that leads us to authenticity. This ability to be authentically oneself leads into embracing and savoring solitude, not just existing in solitude, but savoring it. And you describe solitude, I love this analogy, our mental health spa, our place of peace. What do you mean by this? And what is the role of solitude when it comes to being single at heart?
Yes. This was something that surprised me. Now, I love having time to myself, and I like socializing too. So the two aren't in contrast to each other. And so I thought that people who are single at heart would also, on average, like their solitude. Well, oh wow, it was so much stronger than that. Every person who shared their life story with me, when I asked them how important, if at all, it was to have time to themselves, every one of them said it was so important. Three people said it was like breathing.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And and because this is like a superpower, because we enjoy our solitude, because we're not scared of it, we are protected to a large degree from loneliness. We don't think about solitude and say, oh no, I'm going to be lonely. we think, oh, good, I have some time to myself. And that means we can use it productively, or we can use it creatively, or we can use it just to relax or to be more spiritual. We can really embrace it and get a lot out of it.
Right. It really feeds us so that we can thrive.
Yeah, which is so different from what we usually hear. Oh, those people who spend time alone, they're losers. There's something wrong with them. They're serial killers.
I know, I know. And I'm glad you mentioned that lonely term, because one of my questions is just about that. I want to really, really dive deep into dispelling some of these prevalent myths. Um, it's often the word or the concept that is tossed around to scare, and it's
Mhm.
errantly associated with being single. That you're going to be lonely if you're single. And you write, "quote
Uh-huh.
People who are single at heart do feel lonely sometimes, but that tends to happen when they are not single or not living alone." And so this will parallel or maybe cross over a bit with what you just said. Why is that? Why does the world have a misconception about loneliness when it comes to being single? Or is it a misconception, or is it part of
It is. It absolutely is. So there's this very influential scholar who was called to a congressional committee to give a talk on loneliness. And she started out by saying that the number of single people was increasing and the number of people living alone was increasing. Like, that was her evidence for why we need to be worried
Oh,
about
wow.
loneliness.
Well, that's
Wow.
interesting.
And that and you see those kinds of statements all the time. I mean, that bothered me
Right.
because she should know better. But, what people are missing is the question of whether people are single or whether they're spending time alone because they want to, or because they have been ostracized or neglected or maybe widowed. So let me
Mhm.
give you an example
Okay.
from my personal life. So my mother went straight from living with her parents to living with my dad.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago. Cohabitation wasn't a thing. Um, and she lived with him for 42 years until he died. And when he died, and all of us kids had already flown the coop, she was all alone. So think of that and compare that to me. I had been living alone ever since graduating
College.
from
Yeah.
college, on my own because I wanted to, because I love living alone. And people who love their having a place of their own are entirely different than someone like my mom, who was widowed from this man that she loved and was with every day for 42 years. So, of course, you can say she's living alone, she's spending time alone, she's lonely. But that's a whole different story when you look at somebody like me or some young people who see having a place of their own as an achievement, a triumph. So let's stop stigmatizing it.
Right. I think you point out a key thing here, and you said this in your TED talk too. It's the mastery of when you're on your own, you have to learn how to do your finances. If you're successful and you're doing well,
Yes,
you're going to have to learn your finances. You're also going to have to learn how to take care of whatever the many things are that
yes.
maybe couples split up
Uh
and
huh.
say someone doesn't know. And so that mastery happens. So when that spouse does pass away or moves on or something
Mm-hmm.
happens, that's also part, I think, of the fear. It seems to me that they don't know how to do some of the fundamental things that
Yes.
the singles have been doing for years.
Right. And that leads to one of my favorite conclusions from reading all this literature and doing my own research and talking to my single at heart people. In contrast to this idea that, oh, you're going to grow old alone and be miserable and lonely. In fact, people who are single at heart are doing especially well when they get older. And one of the many reasons is what you just pointed out, that they have been organizing and maintaining their lives their whole lives. So you know how when couples split things up, usually unfairly, um, that can feel like a real advantage at the time because you don't have to do everything yourself. But then, if you become widowed or divorced, or your spouse can't do it anymore, then you're stuck. Either you don't know how to do all those things, or you're out of practice. And when that happens, let's say when you first get widowed, it's like an extra burden on top of everything, on top of your grief. So that's one of the ways that people who are single at heart are doing well when they're in later life, because they've invested in their lives, they've invested in themselves, and they've invested in other people.
Well, we're going to take a quick break to introduce you to three sponsors for today's episode. But when we come back, Dr. DePaulo is going to talk about how life actually gets more satisfying and more fulfilling as we age from our 40s and beyond, as well as talk about anyone who may have found themselves widowed or a widower and was in a very happy relationship. She'll speak to how the next chapter, while definitely full of grief, can be absolutely fulfilling in its own way. She will also talk about what she envisions and hopes can be achieved by those of us who are single at heart and loving it, and courageously do so can actually bring more peace and fulfillment for everyone, so that we are not forcing ourselves into boxes that do not nourish us. And of course, we will end with a petit plaisir, where Bella will talk about something that I think this audience will especially appreciate, something that is so simple and doesn't cost a penny. I'll be back on the other side with the second half of our conversation. This year, I'm thankful for Honey Love because there is nothing worse than suffering from an uncomfortable bra or shapewear. Honey Love has revolutionized the bra and shapewear game. Say goodbye to uncomfortable underwear and bulky fabrics that trap heat. Honey Love's bras feature supportive bonding that eliminates the need for underwire without sacrificing lift. Plus, they're made with fabric that's so soft you won't want to take it off. And their shapewear uses targeted compression technology, so you no longer have to feel like you're suffocating while wearing effective shapewear. You'll immediately feel and see the difference. Give yourself the gift of comfort. Plus, for this month only, Honey Love is giving up to 50% off site wide. Visit honeylove.com/simple to shop their November sale. Do you know that feeling when you get home after a long day and immediately want to take off your bra? With Honey Love, you'll never experience that again. Honeylove's best-selling crossover bra is so comfortable, it's sure to be your new go-to. This bra gives all the support of traditional bras without using any underwires. Plus, mesh detailing adds a touch of sexy. This is the one bra you'll actually enjoy wearing and won't want to take off. When it comes to shapewear, Honeylove's best-selling Superpower short is the go-to. It has targeted compression technology that distinguishes between areas where you want more support and areas where you need less compression. Their signature X targets and sculpts your midsection without squeezing your natural and beautiful curves. Plus, the best part is it won't ever roll up or down thanks to flexible boning hidden in the side seams. Honey Love is just as easy to put on as it is to take off. Thank goodness. Shapewear shouldn't be hard. Their products make you look good and feel good. So, ladies, gift the gift of comfort this holiday season. Whether you're attending a wedding, hosting a big Thanksgiving dinner, or simply seeking that everyday boost of confidence, Honey Love is a perfect plus one. As a Simple Sophisticate listener, treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save up to 50% off site wide at honeylove.com/simple this month only. Inventory is limited and the sale ends soon, so don't miss their best deals of the year. And after your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please do share that the Simple Sophisticate sent them your way. It's time to ditch that underwear. It's time. Isn't it time to ditch that underwire for good, thanks to Honey Love? The Simple Sophisticate is also sponsored by MeUndies. Gifting is a no-brainer this holiday season thanks to the unmatched comfort and style of MeUndies. From undies and bralettes to socks and loungewear, MeUndies has the perfect gift for yourself or anyone else on your list, even those hard-to-gift people. MeUndies has a holiday gift guide that makes it all super easy. Having received their products, they are most definitely super comfortable and a little bit of fun as well. There is style for everyone from black classics, my go to fun, expressive prints. MeUndies has a look for everyone. Plus, they come in sizes extra small to quadruple extra large, guaranteeing a flattering cut for every body. And they have versatile loungewear. MeUndies isn't just about underwear. Explore the lounge collection featuring comfy joggers, hoodies, onesies, and more. And with their unmatched comfort, their signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. It's breathable, stretchy, and oh so comfortable, making it ideal for all day wear. And it's responsibly sourced. They use sustainably sourced materials and work with partners that care for their workers. And if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on Me Undies. So, as a simple sophisticate listener, knock out your holiday shopping today and get 20% off your first order plus free shipping at meundies.com/simple sophisticate. That's MeUndies, MEUNDIES.com/simple sophisticate for 20% off plus free shipping. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in. So, if you're like me and you love working out in the outdoors, but you also know that sometimes that's just not possible to get outdoors, whether it's because of the weather or because of our schedule and the inability to do so, I have what you're looking for. Let me introduce you to Hydro. Hydro offers a state of the art at home rowing machine that delivers the ultimate full body workout, and it was designed by rowers. And with regards to the outdoors, this is your opportunity to travel the world in your own home, to see the beauty of Mother Nature. How ultimate is this workout? It works 86% of your muscles. And I'm talking arms, legs, core. Woo! And it only takes 20 minutes. Rowing with Hydro is low impact, so low risk of injury. The workouts I have had on Hydro have been simple to set up and beautifully enjoyable for the eyes and thus the motivation. In 20 minutes, I had a full body workout and I didn't have to step outside nor travel around the world to see these magnificent natural spots of beauty. Hydro workouts are taught by Olympians and world class athletes. They're great coaches, regardless of your fitness level, from athletes to beginners. And the workouts, as I mentioned, are filmed all over the world outside. So you're not stuck in some studio looking at a blank wall. These locations are gorgeous. Hydro will keep you motivated, and 90% of customers are still active 1 year later. Hydro has you covered with free standard shipping, a 30-day risk-free trial, and a 1 year warranty. So when it comes to working out in Bend, as you know, I love to go outside and ski and paddle and walk, but there is inclement weather or there is a tight schedule at times, and I cannot wait to get on my Hydro and row around the world and vicariously travel when I can't hop on a plane to do so to see the beauty of Mother Nature. Join the growing rowing community at Hydro. Take advantage of Hydro's special holiday savings right now. Head over to hydro.com and save up to $500 off your Hydro. That's HYDROW.com. Hydro.com. There we go. That is a great transition. I want to talk about the chapter you just alluded to with regards to the later in life, because that chapter brought so much comfort. But I want to really quickly talk about what you just mentioned there about the one versus the ones. We often hear that term thrown around. Have you found the one? Or I found the one with regards to love and romance.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but you update this phrasing and write about the
Mhm.
benefit of nourishing the ones, plural, in our life. What, who are the ones and how or why do they enrich our lives as opposed to just the one?
Right. So the ones are any of the people in our lives that we care about and value and want to have in our lives. It could be friends, relatives, mentors, coaches, coworkers.
And you
Um,
mentioned dogs too, which I so appreciate.
yes, that's right.
So
Pets
cats
for
and dogs, I
sure.
love that.
Whenever I don't include them, somebody who's listening will say, "My pets,"
Yes.
and they're right. They're important. And when we are single, we can really nurture those connections and spend time with people and energy without worrying that some romantic partner is going to feel like, "Oh, you're neglecting me." That that should be my time. You should
Right.
pay more attention to me.
It's so
So that's
true.
one thing. Another thing is when you have the ones instead of the one, you have more potential for resilience. You're less at risk. So let's take the example that people often use to try to scare single people, like what's going to happen to you if you get sick, right? Well, what's going to happen to you if you're married, you get sick, and your spouse is sick too, or your spouse is has to work,
Yeah.
or your
Right.
spouse is mad at you, and you did this celebrated thing of looking at your spouse and saying, "Oh, you are my everything," and demoting your friends, demoting your relatives, and having this little world of you and your spouse. And
Mm-hmm.
that can work when things are going great. But I think people don't realize the risk of that.
Right.
And I'm not saying all married people do
Right.
that. Of
Right.
course, they don't.
Right.
But if you're single at heart and you've invested in your single life and you've invested in your friends and you need
Yeah.
help and you have a circle of friends, you have the ones rather than the one, there's probably going to be someone who can be there for you. And if
Right.
they're having a hard time, there's somebody else.
Right.
And also, I think it provides a more psychologically rich life to have a number of people in your life rather than putting everything on one person. You have more different experiences and perspective.
I want to talk about that psychologically rich definition. You write about that consistently throughout the book. What does that mean? For anyone who hasn't heard that term before, psychologically rich, what does that entail?
Yes, psychologically rich life is a life full of various experiences and perspectives. It's a life of learning and growing. And these different perspectives and understandings and experiences, often they're good ones. You pursue your passions, you do what you love. But interestingly, they can also be really negative ones. So if you become divorced or widowed, as painful as that might be, it could also be very revelatory. You could start to understand the world in a whole different way than you did when you were married.
I just to speak a little bit about who the audience is that's listening. There are men and women who are listening, predominantly women.
Mhm.
I know a lot of them, the age ranges are from 30, some in their 20s, but mainly 30, all the way into 70s and 80s. And I know some of them are divorced, some of them are widowed, some of them are happily married. But I think what you just said there, if someone chooses to explore this opportunity that has resulted from something unwanted, it can provide such a rich, I don't want to say classroom or curriculum or ahas. What do you want to, what could you say to someone who's maybe, how could they're saying, how could a death be a positive thing? What would you say to them if they said, you could tell they loved each other, there was a loving relationship? What would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I first started realizing this when my father died. And I got a sympathy card from someone, and it said, "When my father died, my mother really came into her own." And I just thought that was the weirdest thing to say on a sympathy card. And then a couple days later, I got a card from someone else that said practically the same thing. And I think what they were saying is that as as horrible as it can be, as devastating and grief inducing as it can be, it can also be an invitation to look at yourself anew and look at your life anew and think about what you really care about and what you want to do. So maybe you've had these patterns of doing certain things in certain ways with your spouse, or what you eat or you don't eat, or, it's everything from the littlest decisions of everyday life to the big, big decisions about how you want to be in the world. And I think that's really important. And I've heard from people who tell me that. And it's most persuasive to me when I hear from people who were happily married, like my mother. And, after she was widowed, she said, I will never be with anyone else again unless they're at least as good as my Joe.
I love
And
it.
that's not quite single at heart, but
Right, right,
it's like she
right.
discovered that, after those early months that were so devastating, she discovered that she had these strengths and resources. She was someone who always loved having company, and she'd have guests all the time. And a couple years after she was widowed, she had somebody who came to stay with her for a few days, and she told me that she was getting eager for them to leave.
Wow, that's a revolution for someone who likes to be around people all the time.
It really was. And I was just like, I was so proud of her, because I
Very
think like
honest,
she
yeah.
discovered that there's beauty in herself. And not that she had low self-esteem, I don't mean that,
No, but
but
yeah.
she was really connected to my father, who I also adored, in a traditional way.
Right, right.
And she did come into her own.
That's beautiful. No, it's beautiful. Well, and you mentioned a few instances there, and I spoke about this or mentioned this briefly before we started taping. This idea of hedging. For those
Right.
of us who do genuinely love our own company, or enjoy living single and have a good balance of social that
Mhm.
works for us and our alone time, this book in many ways I feel gives permission, or at least says you can do it without hedging. First of all, what is hedging? I'll let you explain that, and then
Mhm.
why do we no longer need to do that,
Yeah.
or for those who don't want to hedge, why do we do it in the first place?
Yeah. Well, the hedging is when you can't get yourself to quite admit that you love being single. You don't need to be fixed up, and you don't want to unsingle yourself. And that is hard because people don't believe you. They'll say,
Right.
"Oh, you feel that way now, but you just haven't met the right person." It's like they think
No,
they
I
know us
know.
better than we know ourselves. And of course, it's considered
To them,
kind of
yes.
weird,
Yes.
to want to stay single. And that makes it hard too. So one of the people I interviewed for the book told me that, she was chatting with this coworker, I think over lunch, and she told her coworker that she really didn't believe in marriage as an institution. And this coworker said, "Well, but you do want to be in a couple, right?" And she said she just couldn't bring herself to say no. She had to hedge. And, I think that is really revelatory because if you ask people, do you know people who are single and want to stay single? A lot of them will say no. In fact, I had this report years ago. I had this reporter from the Washington Post come and talk to me. She spent like a long time with me. And then she wrote this article about single people afterwards. And she said that she was thinking about what I had said to her, and she was thinking about her single friends, and none of them wanted to stay single. Well, that coworker would have said the same thing.
Right. It's almost as though we're tired of having to fight for it or prove it,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting. You just want to, okay, fine. You believe what you're going to believe, and
Yeah.
I'm just. But at the same time, as you said, this needs to be shifted so that people understand that this is a chosen and
Yes.
fulfilling way of life. So it
Right.
really is going to take the courage of
Yes.
those of us who love it. And your book is part of
Thank
that
you.
movement.
Yeah, let me tell you another
Yeah.
story about this. So I was
Okay.
at a housewarming party in the neighborhood, and this married guy comes up to me, and he says I'm married, blah blah blah, and I told him I'm Bella. I was 69 at the time, so I said I'm 69. I've always been single, and he said, you know, I know someone who was single until she was 65 and she was happily single. But then she found someone and got married and now she's happily married. And I think what he was trying to say to me was, oh, don't worry, Bella. Even in your 60s, you can still
Right.
find someone.
Right.
So I said to him, I like stories better when the single person stays single.
Good for
And
you.
yeah,
That's an example that we need to hear.
yeah. And then I said, I think marriage is overrated.
Good for you.
And he paused for a minute and he glanced over at his wife, who was out of earshot. And he said, if I told you what I really felt about that, I'd have to sleep in this shed tonight.
I remember reading that. That made me chuckle. That made me chuckle.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's part of it too. It's a way to convince some people and themselves of
Yeah.
their choices, I guess.
Yeah.
You mentioned I wrote this question, but I'll maybe just spitball it here. It's less about us not finding the right person. It's that relationships are not a fit for a single at heart. It has no necessarily a reflection on anyone we have attempted or have been in a relationship with. And I think you wrote
Right.
about it as well. But in general, and I look back on my own relationships, there was nothing glaringly wrong. They were wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
lovely people, but every
Mm-hmm.
single time I was the one ending it,
Yes.
lovingly amicable,
Yeah.
but it was like I kind of see the future and I know I'll be more fulfilled doing it on my own.
Yes.
And so it's
Yes.
less of, I think, so people aren't, it's not a personal attack on the people we've been with or the people we might have been with. It's more of a reflection on the idea of being in a relationship. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I think it's so important. And the stories that were most compelling to me were told by people, single at heart people who did find the one
Yeah.
and loved the person, had no complaints about them, and they just didn't want to live a traditional couple life.
Right.
And one of the reasons that's so important is it's important to the other person that you have maybe gotten involved with
Yeah.
romantically. And they are wondering,
What's wrong
what
with
did I
me?
do wrong?
Right.
I've been a good boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse.
Yeah.
And, but if the person you're involved with is single at heart, it's never going to work. And it really isn't the fault of the other person.
That's,
Nothing they
yeah.
do could change that. It's who their partner is. A single at heart person just isn't ever going to be totally fulfilled. I love the example of the person who told me all about this, and she would try to explain to her the person she was then engaged to, though she called it off, and she said, like, I want to travel the world. And he would say, well, we can travel. We can travel even with kids. And she just thought, that's not what I have in mind.
Oh my gosh, I can relate.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you write this in the conclusion. I thought it just ties in beautifully because the more we understand that there are different ways of living a fulfilled life, you write, this is a good thing because the people who are drawn to such partnerships would be those who really want them. And so we
Yes.
wouldn't be forcing or
Right.
indirectly forcing people to be married when it
Right.
doesn't speak to them, but they're trying to do what society is going to applaud. So
Yes.
there's peace to
Yes.
be found for everybody if we just
Right.
accept
Right.
there's multiple ways to be fulfilled.
Right. So single at heart is not an anti-marriage or anti-coupling, but
Right.
I mean, I acknowledge that for some people, leading a traditional coupled or married life really is what's going to be most fulfilling for them. But that message doesn't need to be out there because it already is.
Exactly.
There's nobody who hasn't heard
Loudspeaker.
that. Right. So, what I'm trying to say is that there are people for whom single life is equally as fulfilling and
There you go.
meaningful and joyful.
Thank you. That's what I most a lot of, I'm so grateful for so much of what you wrote, but that is what I think most grateful for is that it's not that one is better or worse. It's that why not accept that people have different ways of finding a truly fulfilling life. I mentioned, and we talked a little bit about how life turns out is how you titled the chapter 8. I want to talk about this a bit. I really appreciated this book, this chapter. I was a little nervous to read it because I'm thinking, oh, maybe the myths are true, but
Yeah.
no. Thankfully, you share that there are 4 ways in which our lives become more satisfying as we age as a single at heart individual. I'll just list them off here. I want to talk about the 4th one. The first one is the number of single at heart individuals increases as we age, as people realize how satisfying it can be, whether by choice or by the loss of a partner or divorce. And then 2, the desire to find a partner declines. 3, pressure from society decreases or we become less influenced by it. And 4, satisfaction increases. And so you write with regards to that 4th point, studies of adults who do not have a romantic partner show that once they get to their 40s and beyond, they just keep getting more and more satisfied with their single lives. Why does this happen, Bella? Why more satisfaction as we age, so long as we are committed to this life we love that is being single?
There's two sets of reasons. So one is that some of the barriers to a fulfilling life have come down. And you already mentioned some of those. There's less pressure. We care about the pressure less. There are more of us who are single, so that makes it easier. And then there's the set of more affirming factors that we have invested in our single lives, we've invested in ourselves, we've invested in the people who matter to us, the ones, and now we are reaping the rewards of those investments. So now we can use any resources and the skills we've developed and the confidence that we develop. People become more confident when they're single and use that to pursue our interests and our passions and live by our values. And in some specific ways too, we're doing particularly well. We already mentioned knowing how to cover all the different tasks of everyday life that married people used to split and then don't know how to do half of them. Having been attentive to the people we care about all along instead of getting married and then prioritizing your spouse and demoting everyone else. Like, that single person you used to go out to dinner with, well, now they get lunch.
Yeah, yeah.
That sort of thing. And I'm also the single at heart who love their solitude are comfortable when they have time alone. In fact, they love it. And so they are never going to be that stereotypical old person who's isolated and lonely. They've
Yeah.
got this. And that really, I think,
I
is
love
a
it.
superpower to be able to embrace the time
I
that you
love
have
that.
to yourself.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, and I want to kind of give an overview for readers that are going to read the book. What they will also find, you include a lot of different excerpts. One of them is titled "Flipping the Script." I really enjoyed this. These are sprinkled throughout the entire book, and what you're doing is you bring in actual passages that the media has either verbally said or it's
Yes.
been written. And either in these
Hmm.
passages, it directly or indirectly portrays marriage and coupledom as a goal. And then you take what
Yeah.
was written or said and flip it, you rewrite it. And this demonstrates to me
Right.
as
Right.
a writer, as a reader and a writer, that the power of words are so influential on culture, and the power of media, because
Yes.
of its mass distribution, is powerful. But what were you trying to help reader? What are you trying to help readers understand by doing these excerpts of flipping the script?
I was trying to point out that if you take what you hear about single people and imagine doing the same thing to someone who's married, you would realize what's wrong with it. So, why are you still single? I mean, imagine asking someone, why are you still married?
Yeah.
Or that the studies we were just talking about that show that at every age, starting at age 20 all the way to 96, single people are on the happy end of the scale. And once they get to 40, they get happier and happier with their lives. Well, two sets of scholars published, uh, analyzed data from different countries, and it showed the same thing. Well, one of the sets of scholars, when they tried to explain why single people got happier around age 40, they said that they thought single people had, quote, come to terms with their single life. As if singlehood was a deadly disease that they have to reconcile themselves to. And they are publishing this under the banner of science. It made me so exasperated. Oh, and then they said maybe they learned how to be happily single. I mean, imagine if you found out these people who are happily married and said, "Oh, I guess you learned how to be happily married." So when you flip
Right.
the script, you're just saying to the married people, "Oh, I guess you came to terms with being married, and that's why you're happy." You wouldn't do it, and you can see when you do that what's wrong with what people are saying and assuming about single life.
It really puts a stark highlight or
Yeah.
spotlight on
Yeah.
the bias
Yes.
and the faulty logic, I guess you
Mm-hmm.
could say, behind their argument,
Yeah.
because they've have first of all, as we talked about, they haven't interpreted the research accurately in the first place.
Right.
um I want to share with you, I read your book out of order, just
Yeah.
by pure
Yeah.
interest,
You
and
can do that.
I ended up reading your introduction last,
Oh.
having read chapter 9,
Yeah.
and I read your last sentence as knowing that you would have chosen that last sentence intentionally.
Right.
And I hadn't read your introduction, but I thought, and I was
Oh.
thinking to myself, I'm going, okay, there's a reason she chose this.
Right.
What is that reason? And it kind of resonated with something that had happened in my own life, and so I was like, oh goodness, and my heart was just fluttering, and
Wow.
I. Uh, I guess I want to share with you that thank you for validating that I'm not the only one, and I know many other people are going to understand this when they read the book, where our parents just don't get it.
Yeah.
My parents are happily married too,
Mm-hmm.
and very supportive of my journey,
Mm-hmm.
very similar to what your mother and you have experienced. And I just want to say I appreciate your
Oh,
vulnerability to share that with us,
thanks.
because I think a lot of people are going to go, yep, I'm battling this internally, but I'm also just kind of giving up trying to prove it to them,
Yeah.
or I'm maybe succumbing to just going
Right.
along with whatever it is. But as you said, people who live a single at heart life have been courageous enough to choose to continue to live it. And that speaks volumes of the quality of life they're going to continue to have. So my question is, because you included that example at the end of your book with regards to what your mission
Yeah.
is for writing this
Yeah.
book, what is the world or the culture or modern day world, what do you think it will look like for everyone
Yeah.
once this awareness of fulfillment is out there for people who are living a single life and loving it
Right.
because they've chosen it?
Yes, I
What
will
does that
say
look
that.
like
But
to
should
you?
I tell them the story about my mom first?
You're welcome. Yes, I didn't want to
Oh
spoil it, but
no.
if you want, I'll let you do that. I didn't want to spoil that
Oh,
for
all
people
right.
because it's helpful, though. It is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay.
I found it helpful.
So I was my mom is no longer living, but I was close to her, and especially after my father died, she lived for 7 more years, and we spent a lot of time together. We traveled together, and she never, during those years or any of the other previous years of my life, she never pressured me to get married, not even subtly. And I was so proud of that. I thought it meant that she understood that I was happily single. She knew I had friends. She had met a lot of them. I owned a house when I was in Charlottesville. I have a career that I love, and so I thought she got it. And the first and only time she ever brought up my single life was the last time I talked to her alone as she lay dying. And she said, referring to me being single, I worry about you. I was just heartbroken. I just, I had no idea that she was all along worried about me. And I wish she understood that for me, it was single life that was going to help me stay happy and healthy and flourishing throughout my life. And that if I had, pressured myself to get married, I would never feel as real. I wouldn't feel like I was being me and I wouldn't be as fulfilled. And so that experience kind of captures one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. I want the parents and everyone out there who has a single person in their life that they're worried about um, to want to think about whether maybe they're living their best life. Now, that doesn't apply to all. I mean, there are single people who really want to be coupled and really will be happier if they're coupled, but it's not everyone. And so, know your single person.
There you go. Know your single person and trust them when they tell
Yeah.
you they're
Yes.
happy.
Yes.
Don't disbelieve that. I think that's,
Right.
yeah.
So should I
No,
read you the last few paragraphs of the book that
yes.
address the
I
question?
would
Okay.
love that because that really does answer the question of what you envision. Yes, that'd be beautiful.
Okay. A new and more enlightened understanding of what it can mean to be single and to be human would, of course, be a tremendous boon to people who are single at heart. We've been doubted and disparaged for so long. It would be sublime to be validated and appreciated instead. Those of us who already understand ourselves as single at heart are not the only ones who would benefit. So too would all those children, teens, and young adults still trying to get to know themselves. A new option would be available to them as liberating and as meaningful as the realization that not everyone is heterosexual. It would also be freeing to adults of all ages who are teetering on the edge of claiming single life but feel reluctant to take the leap. Marriage rates would probably decline. Fewer new romantic relationships would be launched. But that too would be a good thing because the people drawn to such partnerships would be those who really want them. They will be free to find someone who really does want a conventionally coupled life. Parents will be freed from the worrying assumption that there is something amiss about their grown single children. Mothers on their deathbeds will tell their single at heart children how very proud they are that their children are living their best, most authentic lives.
Oh, no, it's a beautiful conclusion and a beautiful vision. I hope you helped us get along the way, and I hope we keep going. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on because I know there are a lot of these listeners out there who are right where we are and where we're in different journeys and now just want not the
Yeah.
approval because I don't think
Yeah.
that's what it is, but just the support,
Validation.
validation. That's what it is. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
As we wrap up, we have a tradition here on the podcast of concluding with a question about petit plaisirs or simple luxuries. And to
Yeah.
draw from your book, you talk about how single at heart individuals seem to be savorers. They
Yes.
notice and they appreciate even the small everyday pleasures of everyday life. And so I would love for you to share what is a petit plaisir or a simple luxury that you enjoy and savor to elevate your everydays?
Oh, wow. Every single day I try to go out into nature. And I have the great good fortune to live near the beach, and I will walk along the beach or walk along nature trails in this gorgeous part of the country. It's Summerland near Santa Barbara, which is north of LA. And I also do something even smaller than that, which is look out the window. I have a peek of the ocean, and I will make sure that I savor that every day. And I don't see that as being unproductive or wasting my time. It's nurturing. And I've been here 23 years and I never take it for granted. Every single day, I wake up and think to myself, I cannot believe I get to live here and to live this single life.
Thank you for sharing that. You exemplify in that gratitude, being present, and as you just said, 23 years and you're still appreciating it. I think that's a testament to so much of what we're listening to in this conversation. I want to share one other example for readers that you include excerpts of role models that your participants in your study came across in their life that reminded them or revealed to them that living single can be a luxuriously flourishing, fulfilling life. And for me, and I've gushed a little bit already, but for the first time in 44 years, I've kind of known that people like this exist, but I've never met them, and I certainly have never read a book that provided all the research from a genuine perspective. And I thank you for writing this, but also being here with me today because I don't really know how to put it in words yet, but it's been real to use the word we just spoke about, very nourishing. So thank you, Bella. Um, with that, I'll conclude and say, listeners, Dr. Bella DePaulo's new book, Single at Heart: The Power, Freedom, and Heart-Filled Joy of Single Life, is now available wherever you shop for your reading material. You can learn more about her online on her website, belladepaulo.com. And I want to thank you again for your book and for joining me today, Bella.
Thank you. I had a wonderful time.
I want to thank again Dr. Bella DePaulo for joining me to talk about her new book, Single at Heart, now available wherever you shop for your favorite books. And visit the show notes on the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 370 for direct links to the book, to Dr. DePaulo's website, Instagram, and everything else we've talked about on today's episode. And just to let you know that we have one more episode in 2023. And as it is airing on the 20th of December, Wednesday the 20th, and the winter solstice officially falls on Thursday, the 21st of December, I thought it was the perfect time to talk about how to celebrate just that, the upcoming winter solstice, a celebration of a shifting from the darkest days going into every single day more minutes of daylight. And so I'll be sharing how to savor a quiet Christmas. And so I'll be sharing how to savor a quiet Christmas inspired by British cookbook author Nigel Slater in his Christmas Chronicles, a wonderful book as well as podcast to listen to because as he says, Christmas is celebrated by non-Christians and Christians alike. It is a cultural event as much as a religious one, and its history is confused. Many of the festival's observances date from pre-Christian times, and those who celebrate as purely religious event might be surprised to find how much of the festivities hails from pagan times. We celebrated winter long before we celebrated Christmas. And as he writes, he, being a happy atheist, celebrates Christmas as much as anyone with food and gifts and, yes, carols. But I fully accept that much of my own celebration also has a bit of a religious history. So we're going to talk about how to savor Christmas through the lens of arriving at the winter solstice so that we can really garner the nourishment that this time of year can provide if we open up the lens of all the many different ways it can be celebrated. I do hope you'll join me. That's episode 371 that will air on Wednesday, December 20th. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy this podcast or specifically enjoyed this particular episode, I invite you to write a review or rate the show wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcast. It means more than you know, as new listeners will discover what this show is all about. Wishing you a wonderful start to December, and be sure to stop by the blog in the meantime, as every Friday there's a this and that, sharing all sorts of holiday gifts and shows and things to enjoy throughout the season. Until the next episode, bonne journée. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, visit the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, with the shortened URL tsll.co or thesimplyluxuriouslife.com. For more in-depth exploration of how to cultivate your own unique, simply luxurious life, pick up my new book, which became both a bestseller and #1 new release in France Travel, The Road to Le Papillon, Daily Meditations on True Contentment. Available in all 4 formats for your preferred reading or listening. My first book, titled Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, and my second book, Living the Simply Luxurious Life, are also available in each of the 4 formats. Readers can now join the more intimate The Simply Luxurious Life international community by becoming members of the blog, which offers the benefits of ad-free reading site-wide, unlimited access and exclusive access to content on the blog, such as the monthly A Cup of Moments with Shannon video chat, tours of my home Le Papillon, the monthly What Made Me Smile post, and monthly Ponderings post, as well as the exclusive opportunity to enter all of the giveaways during the annual French and British weeks. To stay caught up on all things Simply Luxurious, the podcast, blog post, the cooking show, and receive exclusive news, as well as an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart each new month, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's free monthly newsletter, arriving on the last day of each month in your inbox. There is also a weekly newsletter, which is also free, and arrives each Friday to keep you caught up on the recent weekly posts on the blog. Enjoy with a hot cuppa or cup of morning coffee, and stay in the know about all things simply luxurious. Look for 2 new episodes of this podcast on the first and third Wednesday of each month. And until next time, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Thank you for tuning in. Bonne journée.